So today we're going to dive into something really interesting. We're looking at the collision of two completely different worlds. You've got the raw, powerful force of a personal, emotional plea on one side, and the rigid, formal logic of the legal system on the other. Let's explore what happens when the heart goes right up against the rulebook.
And that's really the big question here, isn't it? This whole story is about a signature campaign, a former president, and this fundamental tension between what we feel in our hearts and what's written down in the law.
Okay, so our story really kicks off with this essay. It's called It's Our Turn, Dad, My Journey for PRRD. And what's important to know is this is not a legal brief. It's not a political manifesto. It is a deeply personal account from a supporter about their journey, their sacrifice, and their absolute belief in a cause.
Right here. This quote, it just cuts right to the chase. The author is being incredibly honest about their motivation. This isn't about being practical, it's not about legal strategy, it's about finding some kind of remedy, a way to heal what they call a deep wound. It's purely an act of emotional healing.
So let's actually break down what kind of argument is being made here. It's so important to understand the language being used to see why it connects so powerfully with some people while being completely dismissed by others.
All right, so we're basically dealing with two totally different ways of convincing someone. On one side, you have pathos. That's all about appealing to emotion. The goal is to build solidarity, to give comfort, to make you feel something. And then on the other side, you have logos, which is all about logic and reason. That's the language of the courts. And this essay we're looking at, it is a masterclass in pathos.
Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. When you use a super emotional story to push for, say, a specific legal action, you start to see these patterns pop up. We call them logical fallacies. Now, this doesn't mean they're lies, not at all, but they are flaws in reasoning that can be incredibly persuasive.
Let's go back to that line, that really powerful one. You can just feel the intensity, can't you? Love, grief, a feeling that's literally bursting out. It's visceral, and it's supposed to be.
This is a textbook example of what's called an appeal to emotion. The fallacy happens when the argument is basically, because I feel this so strongly, my position must be right. The intensity of the feeling itself is presented as proof that the cause is valid.
And this is where you see the two worlds just completely miss each other. All that charged language, grieving, bursting out of me, deep wound, it creates a really powerful emotional narrative. But in the world of legal reality, that story, no matter how genuine it is, can't be submitted as evidence. Emotions just don't prove that a legal case is sound.
All right, so the argument then shifts, right? It goes from how I feel to look how many of us feel the same way. The focus moves from personal feeling to the huge number of people who share that feeling. They're not alone. They're part of a massive global movement.
And this brings us to what's known as the bandwagon fallacy. You've heard this one before for sure. It's basically the if everyone is doing it, it must be right argument. It relies on the power of popularity, on the idea that you can figure out what's true just by counting heads.
And look, this is so important to understand. 1 million voices is an unbelievably powerful political statement, but it runs directly against the entire principle of judicial independence. The Supreme Court is specifically designed not to listen to the size of the crowd, but to listen to the text of the law and the Constitution.
So what about the people who say this is all for nothing, that it's a futile effort? Well, the author has a very personal answer for that. It's rooted in their own sacrifice. They are literally financially invested, still paying off credit card debt for their cause.
This gets into something called the sunk cost fallacy. And honestly, we all do this. It's that feeling of, man, I've already put so much time, money, and energy into this, I can't back out now. We feel like we have to keep going just to justify what we've already spent, even if the path we're on isn't actually working.
So let's walk through this, right? First, there's the investment, a huge personal financial cost. Then comes the fallacy, this idea that because I sacrifice so much, the movement must be worthwhile. And here's the problem with that logic. It completely sidesteps the question of whether the actions were ever going to be effective in achieving the legal goal in the first place.
So when you put all these pieces together, what you realize is we're not just looking at a few talking points. We're looking at two totally different, clashing worldviews.
Yeah, on one side you've got pathos and populism, think hearts, think crowds, what the author calls warm bodies. And on the other, you have legal logic, where power comes from statutes, from treaties, from the Constitution. It's a fundamental difference.
This chart really lays it all out, doesn't it? Look at the source of power. From the author's point of view, it comes from the crowd, from passion.
For the legal system? Nope, it's the law books. How do they validate what's right? The author says if thousands of people sacrifice, the cause must be just. The legal system says justice is determined by evidence and due process. And their objectives couldn't be more different. One wants to soothe the soul, the other wants to determine if a specific law was broken. It's two different languages.
And this isn't just some academic debate. This clash has massive, real-world consequences for how justice works and how our government is supposed to function. It really puts the whole idea of judicial independence on trial.
This really gets to the heart of the tension, right here. The supporters' argument is that the Supreme Court should understand and be reminded by all these signatures. But the legal reality is that judges take an oath to be impartial. Deciding a case based on how many signatures were gathered, well, that would violate the absolute core of their professional ethics.
And when you actually turn to the legal case itself, you see just how different this world is. The legal logic side is playing by a very strict set of rules. For example, there's a 2021 Supreme Court precedent that says even if you withdraw from the ICC, you're not off the hook for investigations that already started. There's the issue of jurisdiction. The investigation covers a time when the Philippines was still a member. And then there's this big one, complementarity. It's a key idea for the ICC. Basically, it means the international court only gets involved if it decides a country's own investigations aren't genuine or sufficient. These are the hard, structural facts of the case.
The big legal fight itself, it's all centered on this thing called habeas corpus. So step one, the former president's siblings argue that working with the ICC is unconstitutional. Step two, the government fires back arguing the case is moot because the Supreme Court doesn't have physical custody anymore. And step three, that leaves the court with this huge, super technical question to solve about something called constructive custody. It's this intricate, complex world of legal process, a million miles away from pure passion.
So if the signatures don't count in court, you might be asking, then why do it at all? And that's a great question, because it does matter, just not in the way you might think. It is a powerful form of pressure from outside the legal system, and public sentiment can sometimes influence how quickly a court deals with a big case, but most importantly, its real goal was never to be legal proof. It's to do exactly what the author said it would, to build solidarity and to bring emotional comfort to supporters.
And that's what I want to leave you with, this final, really tough question to think about. In a system that's built on both the will of the people and the rule of law, where exactly is that line? What's the right balance between a passionate, loud public voice and the quiet, impartial halls of justice? That's a question every single democracy has to constantly figure out,